Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're back. Episode 101 after the fanfare that was episode 100.
And like we just started the show, cat jumps on my desk, immediately bites my hand.
It's like, yeah, we're setting you in the mood, bitch. Yeah. Let's go.
Wake up, asshole. It's showtime. Dance. Hi everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 101, so all the festivities are over. We won't celebrate any more shows from now on. It's just going to be a miserable grind from here on out.
Yeah,
until we find all the internet
settled
stories.
Into the groove. Wouldn't that be something to just run out of internet stories? Like,
that's the goal.
Yeah.
Or die trying. Preferably die trying, because at a certain point, I don't want to read all these.
Yeah.
Kind of didn't want to read this one today, because this is a fucked up one. But all of mine are fucked up. I'm drawn to like horrible people, like a moth to the flame. Yeah, let's just get into it. If you haven't heard the show, we tell each other stories, and here's one of them. This is a story about the Harpe brothers. Micaiah Harpe and Wiley Harpe were born roughly sometime in the mid to late 1700s. It's not entirely clear. We always post our sources on this stuff, and like the dates don't match up in like any of these articles, like within the same article. So it's saying shit like, oh, they were born in the 1770s, and then in 1776 they killed 15 people, and it's like, how'd they do that at 6 years old? Like,
right? The
fuck are you talking about?
Although I've met some 6-year-olds that could probably pull it off, but
yeah. Well, if any two could, it might be these two. They would go on to pass themselves off as brothers, but they were actually cousins. Micaiah was the son of John Harpe and, quote, his wife, and Wiley was the son of Josh Harpe and, quote, his wife. Because I guess women just didn't get names until 1954 or something. Like,
yeah.
Micaiah's birth name was actually Joshua, and Wiley was William, but they went by Micaiah and Wiley. Actually, Micaiah went by Big Harpe, and Wiley went by Little Harpe. So at some point, these fuckers way overcomplicated something as simple as a fucking name.
Yeah.
And you could have given one of those names to your moms, you fuckers. Like,
they're like, nope. Like you said, only men, they get names.
It could have been Big Mom and Little Mom. And that's a better act. So the Harpes were Scottish immigrants who had settled in Orange County, North Carolina. The two grew up together and became kind of an inseparable pair of evil little assholes, and apparently left North Carolina in 1775 with the goal of becoming slave overseers in Virginia.
What a lovely goal to...
Yeah, like aspirations.
Slavery is not bad enough, but like the worst part, like the worst of the worst,
the cruelest
overseers,
cruelest part of like one of the most fucking cruel institutions in the history of man. Unfortunately for them, their disgusting career dreams and human suffering were interrupted by the American Revolution. But the two saw it as an opportunity to inflict misery through the war itself, and quickly sided with the British and joined up with a loyalist gang. It's sad to say, but they were far from the only British loyalists who really just enjoyed marching through America, fucking shit up. So they were raiding farms, raping women, and pillaging, and...
Yeah, that's the thing, and we see it in other areas, but fortunately, humans have a capacity to just be evil. So anytime something like a war comes along and it's like, I can use that as a excuse to like do evil shit. Like there's people that'll, like you said, they couldn't care less about the actual war, like who wins or loses or whatever. They're just like, hey, we get to kill people and rape people. Like,
right. It really wasn't political. Like if the war had been getting fought in Britain, at the time, they would have been on the other side of it, because that's how they could have inflicted the most damage. During this, Little Harpe tried to rape a girl in North Carolina, and in the attempt he was shot by American Patriot Captain James Wood. Little Harpe survived, however, and would join the British troops proper in 1780 for several battles along the Carolina borders. But that was short-lived. The Harpe brothers deserted, and the timeline for them around this point becomes a little blurred. One theory is they joined up with a group of Cherokee raiders and attacked settlements in North Carolina and Tennessee, pretty much living as pillagers. During this time, they supposedly tracked down James Wood and took revenge by kidnapping his daughter, Susan Wood, and another woman, Maria Davidson. The two were forced into marriage, and with Susan Wood being married to Big Harpe and Davidson being married to Little Harpe. The brothers recruited 4 other men, and along with their enslaved women, the party made their way to Tennessee. At some point, a man named Moses Doss took notice of the group and expressed concern for the 2 brutalized wives of the pair, and for his concern, he was murdered.
How dare you care about women? We don't even give them names.
Yeah. The 2 took their wives, and for about the next dozen years, they seemed to settle down in a Cherokee Chickamauga village called Nickajack. Their captive wives became pregnant, but like many who came into contact with Big and Little Harpe, none of their children ever really seemed to survive. Like there's a lot of reports about them having kids and them not lasting through early childhood. Not all of them, but pretty much any time. Despite the British surrender at Yorktown in 1781, the Harpe brothers kept busy with their supposedly Cherokee coordinated skirmishes. It was, these historical stories, it's kind of hard to tell, Yeah, it's very easy for shit to get blown off as like, oh, Indians attacked, and
I mean, we killed 8 of them first, but
yeah, so
they raided our village.
So reading this, like, that's how they always phrase it, is like these were, things they did along with like Cherokee raiders, which was certainly possible, but for all I know, and from the sounds of it, they could have just thrown together a goddamn gang of assholes. But when eventually the American army got tired of these attacks and lashed back at the village of Nickajack, they wiped out that whole fucking village, which has kind of become the American army playbook on any sort of conflict, is like, no matter how they're hit, wipe them out.
Right.
So the Harpes got word of this beforehand and fled the town. And from there, they would kind of hop from camp to camp, still pillaging to get by. By the year 1797, they were living in a cabin on Beaver's Creek near Knoxville. Little Harpe had found a new wife at this point named Sarah Rice, so Big Harpe took Little Harpe's ex and now had himself 2 enslaved, mentally tortured, and probably physically tortured wives. So, believe it or not, this is all actually introduction to the Harpes brothers.
Yay.
Their story, or at least what they're kind of known for, began the next year in late 1798, where they began a murder spree that was one of the most violent and still one of the most violent in American history. They killed 2 men in Tennessee, and then by December of that year, they killed 2 more in Kentucky. While they were certainly stealing shit, like no different than from their pillaging days, they seemed more fixated on the violence of these crimes rather than any financial gain.
That's what I was about to ask, is if there was rhyme or reason, or if they're just like, hey, it's a new hobby. Like,
so, like, that's the thing, is like they were stealing shit, but they weren't going after targets that really had that much to offer money-wise. A lot of them were just, travelers. And if you were traveling back then, it's probably because you didn't like have that much, like you were trying to find a new life.
Although we talked about this in a different episode, probably a couple episodes, like sometimes it's hard to say, like, maybe they were smart to do that because those, A, they were harder to catch the killers, and B,
exactly.
they tended to, and they didn't devote the resources to it because they're just like, oh, some basically poor traveler.
Well, I mean, think about like murders that are hard to solve now are often the ones that are like, we don't see the connection. If it's a transient victim, you're not going to like be able to piece together why they were killed very easily. And they were totally doing that. Like that's what the Harps are known for. They're kind of like the first, really the first recorded serial killer pair in American history. Because like everything they were doing is like, there was money involved, but really this was about killing people and could they get away with it? Like they were just violent. Their preferred method of disposal would become kind of their gruesome signature during this spree, where they would disembowel the victims and fill their abdominal cavities with rocks to sink them in the river. A man named John Langford was murdered in the same manner sometime after this, but this time a local innkeeper who knew the reputation of the Harpe brothers and knew they were some sick fucks pointed the authorities in their direction. They were pursued, captured, and jailed in Danville, Kentucky, but they escaped. When a posse went after them, the young son of a man who had assisted in their capture was the only thing they found. The brothers killed and mutilated him as well. By April 1799, the Kentucky governor issued a $300 reward on each of the Harpe brothers' heads. They fled north, killing more men along the way, and like I'm gonna just sort of casually say that, but you really lose track of how many people they killed during all this. It's a really fucking weird murder spree they went on. Because it's just, if they went somewhere, you can assume that like at least 2 or 3 people died along the way.
It's just what they did. Some people stop and see the world's largest ball of twine, and some people just murder.
You're right. So they fled north, killing more people along the way, and then they killed a camp of 3 men near the mouth of the Saline River. From there, they made their way to the stronghold of the river pirate Samuel Mason. A posse was in pursuit of the brothers, but it was either out of like exhaustion or just like incompetence, or perhaps knowing they were about to step into the territory of the notoriously ruthless Mason gang. The posse just stopped just short of where the brothers had ended up. The Harpes joined up with Samuel Mason's gang and attacked flatboats along the Ohio River, but while the Mason gang was certainly like, they weren't a Robin Hood operation. They were pieces of shit, too. Even they found the Harpes appalling.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's you hear about, like, the Thieves' Code or whatever. There's one thing about being like, oh, we don't mind killing to get our meat, but then there's people that are like, yeah, you guys are just fucked up.
You're just sadists.
Right.
So the brothers, while they were here, loved to take travelers to the top of a nearby bluff, strip them naked, and throw them off just for the fun of it. Sick of their psychopathic shit, the brothers were shown the door, and their time in the Samuel Mason gang was over. They returned to East Tennessee and continued their murder spree. A lot of people were killed in this stretch, potentially as many as 18 people murdered in less than a year, and it could be more. It's you lose track of serial killers, from 50 years ago, how many people they actually murdered. Imagine trying to piece together how many people died in the beginning of the 1800s. And
like you just said too, because back then things weren't as connected, so how many of the murders are just never put together to
Just any camp, anywhere that looked like it wasn't prepared to defend itself from a vicious random attack from psychopaths would be targeted. It didn't matter if there were babies, women, they just fucking didn't give a shit. Like I said, they would even kill their own children. Big Harpe says it's the only thing he regrets doing, or said it was the only murder he regretted committing, was when he killed his infant daughter for crying, but you're still a piece of shit. Like,
okay, you can't just be like, you can't kill a baby and then be like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, that doesn't, you're still a baby killer.
Yeah.
But
so they were in this weird, like I said, the spree was really weird because it was like murder as much as you can, as fast as you can, as you're constantly running from this posse that would kind of, like I said, they stopped at the Mason once they got to the Mason gang territory, but they picked up the search afterwards because people kept dying and they know these brothers were behind it. In that posse was one Moses Stiegel, whose family had been killed by the Harps. So it was just around this point, when the brothers were preparing to kill a settler named George Smith, that the posse finally tracked them down. Demanding their surrender, the two brothers went to run away, but Big Harpe was shot in the leg and the back, and then, quote, subdued with a tomahawk axe, which is a very fucking funny way to phrase doing anything with a tomahawk axe.
Yeah.
I de-escalated the situation with my hatchet. The posse forced the dying Big Harpe into a confession of 20 murders, and from there, a vengeful Moses Stiegel cut off his head while Big was still conscious. The head was hung on a pole at a crossroads near Henderson, Kentucky, where the crossing was called Harpe's Head for many years. Little Harpe escaped.
Seems weird. You kill the guy and then name a road after him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, back then you named roads. It wasn't about, you didn't fucking buy a road or some shit. Who died there? And that's how you knew it. Little Harpe escaped, and actually went back up and joined the Mason gang again, choosing to go under the alias now of John Seton.
But, aren't you that Harpe boy? Like, nope, I'm John.
Nope, John. Just little John.
Yeah, that Harpe boy had a brother, and I definitely don't.
Definitely don't. Had a cousin.
Never. Yeah.
But when a large reward was offered for Samuel Mason himself, he and another member of the gang killed Mason. When they presented the pirate leader's head to collect the money, they were instead recognized as outlaws themselves and arrested.
Whoops.
Yeah, you probably need to think about that when you go for like a goddamn reward, because there was no promise of a pardon with Mason's bounty.
How should we make this check out? Well, just that name right there on that poster under my picture.
Like, just imagine being like the cops then, and just like being like, wait, we can just arrest these two and not have to pay anyone.
One of the things I found out back forever ago when I was going through like the police academy and stuff for that, especially at these large like municipal departments like Columbus or whatever, you know, when they go through hiring, you might have a few hundred applicants. There's always a non-zero percentage of them that are applying for the job that have outstanding warrants for their arrest. And it makes it very easy for the cops when you're like, yeah, I'd like to join you. And they're like, aren't you a criminal? It's like, well, yeah. And it's like, well,
no,
you're not allowed to do that stuff
now
until after you get hired. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure the police back then, same as today, didn't mind when a violent, like, serial killer walked into the department like, hey, I'm here for some money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm sure they're just like, well, we could keep the money and just arrest him. That would be my fear. Like, knowing how fucking
cops even if you weren't a serial
rolled
killer,
then, and probably like, some still
we're gonna
roll.
arrest you for the murder of this guy that you just brought his head in, and we're gonna keep the...
Yeah, like, I wouldn't trust them to pay up. It's dirty dealing. So they were arrested, but the two escaped. But that's where Little Harpe's luck kind of ran out, because he was quickly recaptured and sentenced to hang. In January 1804, Little Harpe was executed, and his head was put on a stake along the Natchez Road as a warning to other outlaws. So on one of the articles that I post, there's actually a photo of this road, and like imagining a head alongside it is very believable and very fucking creepypasta. Like, it's a foggy ass road with like just trees everywhere and shit. And seeing a fucking dude's head on it would have definitely scared the shit out of me. So it's estimated that during their murder spree, they killed more than 40 men, women, and children. Rarely for any like noticeable big score and profit. But almost definitely to satisfy just this evil compulsion in them. When your childhood dream is to be a slave overseer, I guess it's not surprising. Like, your life was only going to go a few ways.
Yeah, you probably weren't going to become like a librarian that helps orphans.
Yeah. As for their 3 wives, they were initially charged as parties to the murder, but they were released in October. Little Harpe's second wife returned to Knoxville to be with her father, later marrying and raising a large family there. Susan Wood recovered from her trauma and, by all accounts, lived a respectable life in Tennessee.
Can you imagine having any semblance of a normal life after going through that?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, because that's like, we're talking at least like, 15, 20 years of your life was like literally a slave to these fucking psychopaths.
Yeah, like you said, being mentally and I'm sure physically abused. But on top of that, I mean, it's hard to imagine being normal, because either you'd have to be like okay with killing, or I mean, I'm sure they were party to and witnessed horrible murders. Like,
yeah. And
if that's horrible to you, which it sounds like it was to them, and I don't doubt in any way that they were not like okay with it. But like, man, I just can't imagine like going on with your life after like witnessing.
No.
In fairness, I don't know if they went with them on the murders or anything like that, but
I'm sure. If nothing else, you watch them kill your children.
Well, that's true too,
yeah. Because they were definitely present for that shit. And that's got to be like, this is actually kind of a positive out of a horrible, horrible negative story that these women kind of were able to, move forward and build a life after all this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can't, it's really hard. Like, it is incredible to watch, to see that people like overcame a trauma like this. And the Maria Davidson, she changed her name to Betsy Roberts, but she went off to marry a man and move to Illinois and raise a family there. So they all, at least were able to, end that chapter of their lives and, not be victims to it, so that.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear they didn't like get that basically the Stockholm syndrome thing where they tried to defend their husband's actions or something.
There's not a lot of details about them, as much as there's not a lot of details about the Harpes, frankly. It doesn't matter, or it doesn't say like, how affected they were, but you can imagine, like, yeah, they probably were never fully, just like, oh, they're dead, I'm better,
right.
It probably stayed with them till the end of their lives, but like the fact that they were able to like, go off, have families, and and not, like I said, not sort of become a product of what happened to them, in the sense of like they it didn't define their lives, which is, when you're forced into a fucked up situation like that, that's probably the most you can ask for, is that, when this is over, like, can I at least still be my own person and not have this shit define me?
Right.
So yeah, that's the Harpe brothers, the kind of
it's
the first of many fucked up killers in America.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them,
at least recorded,
a lot of them that we've covered anyway, there's like some kind of rhyme or reason. Even the ones that it's like, oh, they were just like psychopaths, but you could like kind of see like, oh, they were psychopaths, but they were fascinated by poison or fascinated by this or that. And it's like, these guys are just like, That's murder.
What can we wipe out? I think, if we had more details about him, I think some of those, like, psychologists and stuff would have a fucking field day just trying to pick apart the brains of these fucking monsters.
Yeah, like if I had to guess, because I'm a completely qualified psychologist, if they went from wanting to be a slave, like, overseer to it had to be partly at least one of those just the power thing. A lot of killers just want
there's always a power dynamic.
Victims.
But so many,
and that certainly sounds like it would fit.
But so many serial killers are always like, they're hunters, like they stalk, and like the chase is like part of it and stuff. And like there might have been a little bit of that with the Harpe brothers, but all their stories are just like, hey, I think we can kill them too. Like it was very chaotic and very like impulsive, just like impulsive violence.
Yeah.
That in a way that, like there's a compulsion in pretty much any serial killer, but there's also an aspect of like planning and procedure and process and stuff. There's a rhythm to what they do. And here it just seemed like the way I told it is really how it reads when you read up on it, is just like, it's just flagrantly, hey, we found 3 more people. Fuck them up. Yeah.
And what's kind of incredible to me is, for as little as that, like just like you said, the impulsiveness of their killing sounds like it was, and just a sheer, we're going to be violent, that they got away with it for so long, because usually killers like that, you make mistakes because you're not being smart about it. You're just being violent. But, and I would guess that's part of what that Mason gang, like we kind of joked about the thief's code or whatever, but I bet you a lot of it was just like, you're going to get us fucking caught because you're not acting in any rational way. You're just killing. Right.
It's like you see that shit in movies, like characters, like Red Dead 2, like Micah in that game is very much like in that game, you're playing as a fucking, gang man. Like you're fucking, you're an outlaw. You're not a good person, but you're looking at this guy and it's like, dude, you're fucking nuts, and you're going to get us all in fucking deep shit. Right. Because you can't fucking control yourself. And that, like, there's definitely an aspect of that in these two. So yeah, it's not a very long story, but like to see it go back that far, and it probably, was like American, society's first kind of, grappling match was, people who don't have this like clear motivation, and it's just, having to tackle like 2 guys who are just, at their core, just evil bastards, and not knowing like really how to deal with it. Like they hunted them for fucking ever. Yeah. So yeah, those are the Harpe brothers. Yeah. Add them to my fucking goddamn. I could have just I could have a toilet paper roll list of the pieces of shit I've brought to this show. So yeah.
Well, that's they'll
fun
fit
guys,
right in.
Good times. Couple guys just with a bag of rocks, couple knives, looking for a good time.
Yeah, the moral of the story is like, if you don't want to be killed by psycho killers, there's nothing you can do. Sorry. Like
the moral of the story is, if you're a captain in the army and you see somebody raping a girl, you better shoot to kill.
Yeah, well, that too.
Don't dilly-dally. Don't fucking go easy on him. Just because his name's Little. He's a little fucking animal. Anyway, I'm tired. I'm done.
Yeah.
And we're at half an hour, so that's it.
Harpe brothers, everybody.